Welcome to the Velvet Verdict, honest conversations about how we drift apart and how we find our way back. I'm Velvet, let's get into it. The notification light on a phone screen, the glow that says someone is theirs even when no one is. The empty chair at the dinner table, the feeling of being connected to 1,000 people online, yet sitting in a room that feels too quiet. This is the quiet, shared experience of the modern 20-something. We are supposed to be the generation building lives together, yet so many of us are spending our nights alone. And that silence? It feels heavy for both of them. For the women in their 20s and 30s, the silence often comes with a specific kind of weight. There is the constant, low-level hum of feeling that they must curate their entire existence just to be seen as enough. It is the exhaustion of managing the impression, of worrying that a single misstep means they are failing at being a woman, a partner, or a person. The bridge we build must be wide enough to hold the girl who worries about looking good, and the boy who worries about being seen as weak. For the men, the silence is different. It is the feeling of being invisible in a world that demands performance. It is the exhaustion of having to be the strong one, the fixer, the one who has all the answers, even when they have none. They are terrified that if they show the crack in the armor, they will be discarded. So, they both retreat. They both close the door. One side retreats into the fortress of perfection. The other retreats into the fortress of stoicism. And in the middle, the connection fades. But here's the thing about silence. It is not a verdict. It is just a signal that the old ways of connecting have worn thin. The bridge is broken, but that doesn't mean the two sides are enemies. It just means we need to figure out how to lay a new one that can actually hold the weight of who we really are. We start by admitting the silence, together. Hey, we say, I am tired of performing. We say, I am scared of being seen. And in that shared admission, the heavy feeling begins to lift. Because when we stop pretending to be perfect and start being real with each other, the silence changes. It stops being a wall and starts being a space where something real can finally grow. What the data shows, the scale of the silence. The numbers don't just describe a feeling, they map a landscape where millions of young people are walking through life with the lights turned off. It is not a failure of character, but a statistical reality for a generation. When we look at the specific experience of men, the picture is stark. In the United States, 1 in 4 men aged 15 to 34 says they felt lonely a lot of the previous day. That is 25% of young men. To put that in perspective, that figure is significantly higher than the national average for all Americans, which sits at 18%. It is also higher than the median for younger men across the entire OECD, where the average is 15%. This suggests that what is happening in our country is more acute than a global trend. This isn't an isolated American problem, though it is most pronounced here. Worldwide, 23% of people report feeling lonely a lot of the day yesterday. Interestingly, across the globe, these feelings are fairly similar between men and women, and between age groups. The distinct spike we see in the US, among its youngest men, highlights something specific about our environment. When we broaden the view to the entire country, the scope of the silence becomes even clearer. Roughly 1 in 6 Americans, or 16%, say they feel lonely or isolated all or most of the time. What is striking here is the equality of the experience. Roughly the same share of men and women report being often lonely. This breaks down the old idea that loneliness is primarily a woman's burden, or a man's secret shame. It is a shared condition. The age factor confirms that this is a crisis of connection for the young. Among adults under 50, 22% say they often feel lonely. Compare that to those ages 50 and older, where the number drops to just 9%. The younger generation is carrying the weight of the silence disproportionately. These statistics tell us that the heavy feeling many of us have is not a sign that something is wrong with us personally. It is a sign that the bridge between us has narrowed, and for too many, it has nearly collapsed. We are not failing because we are lonely. We are lonely because the world has made it harder to connect. Recognizing this is the first step toward rebuilding it. What the data shows. The architecture of isolation. The shift isn't just about how we feel, it's about where we spend our days. The physical and digital environments of our 20s and 30s have fundamentally altered the rhythm of connection. We are living in an era of solitude that is growing faster than ever before. Our World in data found that Americans aged 15 to 29 spent about 45% more time alone in 2023 than they did in 2010. That is a massive jump, moving from roughly 4 hours of solitary time per day to 6 hours. This increase dwarfs the trends for older generations, where the rise was roughly 20% for those aged 30 to 44 and only 10% for those 45 and older. For young adults, the landscape of daily life has tilted heavily toward being by oneself. Yet, this solitude often feels less like peace and more like a quiet pressure. We are paradoxically alone together. While we physically separate ourselves, we remain tethered to the digital sphere. A report from Harvard's Making Caring Common found that 73% of Americans name technology as a primary contributor to loneliness. It sits far ahead of other factors, including families not spending enough time together, which was cited by 66%. This creates a strange architecture for our lives. We have more hours of solitude than our parents did, but we are not necessarily using that time to build bridges. Instead, the screen often becomes the default companion, filling the silence without truly resolving the isolation. The bridge between us hasn't just narrowed. For many, the very ground beneath it has shifted. Recognizing that the environment itself has changed is the first step toward fixing it. We cannot simply blame ourselves for the way the world is built, but we can choose to build something better within it. What the data shows: the gender gap in support. The environment has shifted, but the tools we use to navigate it haven't changed much. We still rely on the people closest to us, yet the way we reach out tells a different story for each of us. The data reveals a distinct pattern in how men and women process connection. When the weight of the world feels heavy, women are significantly more likely to turn to a friend for help. Nearly 54% of US women say they would be extremely or very likely to do so, compared with 38% of men. This gap widens when we look at professional support. Women are twice as likely as men to seek out a mental health professional. It suggests that for many women, sharing the burden is a primary strategy for coping, a direct line of communication that opens the door to relief. For men, the landscape looks different. While they may not talk as often, the foundation of their support network remains incredibly strong, particularly among the next generation. When we look at teen boys, 85% say they have a close friend they can go to for emotional support. The vast majority of boys trust their peers enough to lean on them, even if they are less likely to reach out to a parent or a professional. This creates a specific kind of isolation for teen boys. Only 16% of boys say they have no friend they can turn to, a number that dwarfs the 4% of teen girls who feel the same way. Yet, despite having friends, many boys feel that finding someone to talk to is harder than it is for girls. A clear majority of teens, 58%, believe that girls have it easier finding friends to turn to for emotional support, while only 7% think boys have it easier. The silence for a boy often isn't a lack of connection. It is a difference in the channel. He may have his friends right there, but the path to opening up about the heavy stuff feels narrower. Recognizing this gap is vital. It means we cannot assume that, because a man has a friend, he's getting the support he needs. And it means we can encourage men to see that reaching out to a friend is not a failure of independence, but a brave act of connection that bridges the divide. The roots, the pressure cooker of youth. We have to look at why this silence started in the first place. For the men and women in their 20s and 30s, the path to adulthood feels less like a clear runway and more like walking through a fog where everyone else seems to know exactly where they are going. The weight of this uncertainty presses down differently on each side, creating a specific kind of isolation that keeps them from finding each other. For many young women, a significant portion of their mental energy is consumed by the pressure to look good. Research shows that 55% of US teen girls feel a lot of pressure to look good, compared with 39% of teen boys. This isn't just about vanity, it is a heavy burden that can make the simple act of showing up feel like a performance. When a girl feels she must curate her appearance before she can even be heard, connection becomes harder to initiate. She may withdraw, not because she doesn't want to belong, but because the energy required to navigate the judgment feels exhausting. Meanwhile, young men face a different, but equally isolating pressure. They often feel that their worth is tied to being strong, capable, and self-reliant. In this environment, admitting vulnerability or asking for help can feel like a failure of character. The fear of being perceived as weak keeps many men from sharing their struggles with friends, even when they desperately need to. They end up carrying their stress in silence, believing that if they just push harder, the weight will disappear. The result is a generation where the tools for connection are rusted. 80% of US adults say they have no close friends, and the situation is starker for the young. Only 32% of adults under 30 have 5 or more close friends, compared with 49% of adults 65 and older. The men and women who are supposed to be building their lives together are often too busy protecting their own fragile egos to reach out. The pressure to look perfect and the fear of being seen as weak have created a wall between them, and until we can lower the stakes of being human, that wall will remain standing. WHH's The Home and the Bedroom. The independence we assume comes with adulthood is often delayed for our generation. In 2022, nearly 1 in 5 men aged 25 to 34 still lived in their parents' home, compared with just 12% of women that age. For those just turning 18, the gap is even wider, with 57% of young men living at home versus 55% of young women. This shift in living arrangements reshapes the landscape of stress and rest. While men are more likely to be physically present in the family home, the data on sleep and mental health reveals a different kind of burden. In 2023, 53% of U.S. women reported frequently experiencing stress, significantly higher than the 45% of men. Among young people specifically, young women exceeded men their age by 14 percentage points in reported stress levels. The cost of that stress is measured in lost rest. Only 27% of young U.S. women say they get the sleep they need, compared with 46% of young men, a 19-point gap that suggests women are the ones most deprived of recovery time. The toll on mental health is profound. Currently, 28.0% of U.S. adults aged 18 to 29 report having or being treated for depression, a number that is more than double the rate recorded for that age group in late 2017. These statistics paint a picture of a generation navigating the transition to adulthood while carrying heavier loads than those before them. Men may be staying home longer, but women are reporting higher stress and significantly less sleep. Both sides are fighting battles that are often invisible to the other, making the silence at the end of the day feel even heavier. The silence at the end of the day is heavy because it is filled with a specific, unspoken fear on both sides. The fear that we are not enough. For the young men, this often manifests as a burden of expectation. The data shows that 57% of younger men in the U.S. say they feel stressed daily, a number significantly higher than the 48% of other adults. They carry the weight of being providers and protectors, and when they retreat to their rooms, they aren't just escaping. They are trying to process a load that feels too heavy to share. This isn't about avoiding connection, it is about the exhaustion of trying to meet a standard that feels impossible to reach. For the young women, the burden looks different but lands with equal force. While they may not carry the same externalized pressure to be the sole provider, they face a different kind of scarcity. 46% of young American men report daily worry, but the landscape for women is marked by a different kind of isolation. In a world that scrutinizes their appearance and their choices, the feeling of being seen often feels like being judged rather than understood. The 63% of men under 30 who describe themselves as single creates a backdrop of scarcity that affects everyone. But for the women, the loneliness is often compounded by a sense that their worth is tied to things they cannot fully control. This is why the silence feels so profound. It is not just a lack of conversation, it is a mutual retreat into self-protection. The young men, feeling the weight of the world, build walls to keep the stress out. The young women, feeling the weight of judgment, build walls to keep the disappointment out. Neither side realizes that the other is doing the same thing. The bridge we need is not built on fixing the other person, but on recognizing that this heavy silence is a shared wound. It is the sound of two people who are terrified of being left behind, yet too afraid to reach out because they believe they have already failed. Healing begins when we admit that the fear of not being enough is the one thing we have in common. So, where do we start? We start with the smallest possible bridge. It is not a grand declaration of love, nor is it a flawless performance of a relationship. It is simply the act of showing up, imperfectly, to be known. For the woman who feels the weight of being judged, the direction is to practice releasing the need to be perfect. When you share a worry, a failure, or a fear, you are not giving someone a reason to leave you. You are giving them the only thing that can truly connect you, the truth of who you are. You cannot fix your life in a single sentence, but you can fix the moment by being real. For the man who feels the pressure to be the protector or the provider, the direction is to lower the shield just a little bit. It is not weakness to say, I don't know what to do, or I'm feeling scared. It is the bravest thing you can do. When you admit your own limits, you invite the other person into your inner world, and that is where the real work happens. This is why the silence feels so heavy. We have built walls to keep the noise of judgment out, but in doing so, we have locked the connection inside. The path forward is not to tear down those walls entirely. That is too much, too fast. It is to leave one door slightly ajar. Hired today. Send a text that isn't about logistics. Share a feeling. Say, I'm not okay. Or simply say, I'm here. That single gesture breaks the spell of isolation. It tells the other person that they are safe, that they are wanted, and that you are willing to be vulnerable with them. Healing is not a destination we arrive at. It is a series of small choices we make, day by day, to reach out instead of pulling back. It is the decision to trust that the person on the other side of the silence wants to be found just as much as you do. Start there. Start with the small risk of being seen, and let that be the beginning of your way back to each other. The bridge we build must be wide enough to hold both the girl who worries about looking good and the boy who worries about being seen as weak. It is not about fixing the person on the other side. It is about staying present with them, exactly as they are, in the quiet moments when the world feels too loud. This heavy silence in our 20s and 30s is not a verdict that you have failed. It is simply the space where two people, who are both scared and trying, are learning how to be near one another without the pressure to perform. You cannot pull from an empty cup, so if you are exhausted, rest. But do not let the fear of being vulnerable become a wall between you. Letting your guard down is not losing control. It is the bravest thing you can do. It is the signal that says, I trust you enough to show you the real me. Start there. Start with the small risk of being seen, and let that be the beginning of your way back to each other. The connection you are looking for is already happening in the room with you. It is found in the choice to reach out instead of pulling back, to listen instead of defending, to sit in the silence together instead of rushing to fill it. The data shows us that loneliness is a shared wound, but the healing is a shared act of courage. So, if you are feeling the weight of it today, know that you are not alone in feeling it. And if you can, reach out. Send a text, make a call, or just stay in the room. Your presence is the only thing that matters. The rest can wait. This episode was written by a human with the guidance of an AI assistant. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and please tell a friend. If you have a positive comment, please post it. We would love to read them and see if we are helping anyone. And if you have positive feedback, we would like to hear that as well. Thank you, everyone. God bless. See you in the next one.